Welcome to the Background Noise Podcast, episode 10. I am your host, Jack.
I'm Joe.
I'm Joseph.
And this week, it's probably, would have been made more sense to cover during Spooky Month Jamboree, but because of how they decided to release the newest Ghostbusters film, this is what we're doing. So, with the newest Ghostbusters film coming out next week to complete the trilogy, we decided this week to cover Ghostbusters 1 and 2. And this week we thought it would be fun to bring in a local expert. So our local expert this week, I'm going to give a little bit of a backstory on him because honestly, I doubt I'd even be doing this podcast or had the idea for it without him. So basically, at the beginning of the year 2014, I'd say, I pretty much moved out of my sports phase and started getting into my love of music. And so at the beginning of the year 2014, my dad decided he wanted the family to start out the year listening only to Christian music. So I was totally fine with that. I somehow Christian radio was slightly better than it is now, somehow. And so started doing that, and that was okay for about a month. And then I got sick of radio very quickly and wanted music that was more musically and lyrically interesting. So after nagging my dad for albums and bands to listen to, he was just like, here. And it was the gstreakhideout.com 5-star album list. And showing me that might have been the biggest regret of my dad's life because I was on the website all of the time growing up and looking at album reviews, film reviews, and concert reviews, which I've been fortunate enough to actually write a few for those. So that's been a lot of fun. But JFH was really the site and the thing that sort of got me thinking not only about music, but culture in general, critically, from a critical sense. And so my love of music and pop culture that I have today really stemmed from that website and reading all those reviews and just, exploring around there. So I've been fortunate enough to become friends with the guy who not only created the website, but is also no doubt the best artist I know and easily the biggest Ghostbusters fan I know. So he's our guest this episode. John Dibiase, thank you so much for joining us.
Yay.
Thanks, man. I'm honored. I'm totally honored.
Yeah.
That's so cool. It's funny
Yeah.
because I started out as a sports fan too before I got into music. So there you go.
Perfect. That's right, because you're I'm assuming Phillies fan, right? Because you're out in
I
Bethlehem.
was, yes. Yeah.
Okay.
And then there was the strike, which was like in the 90s. And then
That's right.
that's actually when I kind of made my transition to loving music.
Nice. Well, there you go. It's like sport. They decided to take a break, and so you're like, well, fine, then I'm going to take a break from you, and you never went back.
Yeah, exactly.
Nice. Yeah, since you're the guest, sir, we'll make you go first. What was your introduction to Ghostbusters? How did that become a thing, and how has that sort of lasted over the years?
Well, as you can imagine, I'm a lot older than you guys, I guess. I was 16, and that was 25 years ago. So if you do the math, don't. But yeah, so I was 4 when Ghostbusters came out. And, so I'm pretty sure I saw it like when I was 4 in the theater, and it's totally not appropriate for a 4-year-old. But I guess it didn't matter to my parents, who didn't know any better at the time. But yeah. So I mean, I don't know. I don't remember the experience first seeing it in the theater, but I know that they re-released it a couple times around that era. So I don't know, like if it was all in '84 or also in '85 and '86, whatever. But there was a theater local to where I was that would occasionally bring it back, and I remember my mom taking us again, me and my brother, who's 3 years older than me, and I was just a huge fan. And then in '86 they came out with the cartoon show, The Real Ghostbusters, which just, it just made it even more of a passion for me. So I've pretty much grown up with the movie my whole life, just about. And I don't know, it's just like music too, when you like have a favorite band, but then you discover other music, but then maybe like down the rediscover that you really was into, or one of the first bands you're really into. And that's kind of how it was for me with Ghostbusters. So like through high school and basically when it came out on DVD, I think is when I kind of rediscovered it. Like I always still liked it, but I wasn't about to pop a VHS tape in, I guess, during high school and stuff like that. I know, guys, I'm just horribly dating myself here. It's terrible.
Okay, I remember
I
VHS tapes.
remember back then. No, but so yeah. I mean, it's been fun. I mean, I have an 11-year-old son, and he's getting really pumped about seeing the new movie. And I took him to see the original when they've re-released a couple
Oh,
times
nice.
last year. Yeah, and 2016 when they did the horrible reboot, which I refused to see. I took him when they re-released the first movie, and then they had it at the drive-in last year during. And they were just showing old movies, so I took him to that, and I think we actually went twice in 1 week. So I was like, "Dude, it's at the drive-in." And then like 2 weeks ago, they re-released it again to theaters, and I think it was Halloween weekend or something, and I was super stoked, and my son was excited to go, and afterwards he's like, "I'm a big Ghostbusters fan. I'm excited too," and I'm like, "Good." That's what I like to hear, but I don't force it on him. So the fact that he's excited about it too makes me happy.
There you go.
Yeah. But yeah, so pretty much grew up with it. We just rekindled the passion a bit, a little like after it came out on DVD and stuff. And then I don't know, just one of those movies that like it's got a lot of nostalgia. It's rooted in my childhood, and I just super enjoy it. So I think there's an element to our favorite movies that also represents a certain period in your life. So like, I will never say it's the best movie ever, but it's my favorite. So
Yeah.
I'm not going to argue with anybody who doesn't like it. Fine, it's to each their own. But it's my favorite, and it's more than just the movie itself. It's been growing up with it and stuff like that. So yeah, it's been experience, I guess.
That's awesome. That makes a lot of sense. That's really cool.
Thanks.
I think my experience is way less exciting. My memory of it is back when Netflix first started streaming. I think that was 2007. I remember very vividly, it was the second film I watched on streaming. Because again, streaming was just this whole new thing. It was so cool. The first one was Men in Black. That was great.
Nice.
And then the second ended up being Ghostbusters. And I was like, I was 7 or 8. And so I think I remember liking it and enjoying it, but it was never one that my family ended up revisiting or anything. It was just, I always remembered liking it. But then after getting to know you, John, and every other picture you posted on Instagram was a Ghostbusters one, I'm like, I should probably watch this again.
Bad.
It wasn't that bad. I'm exaggerating.
Every third picture.
Every third.
Yes,
picture,
that's more like it.
Yeah.
So, and just because most films and shows we have very similar, like a lot of the similar stuff. Exactly, very similar tastes. So I realized, this being so high on your list, is like I definitely need to revisit it at some point. And so this was a great time for me to do it. And so I ended up earlier this week watching 1 and 2. And man,
Had you ever seen 2 before?
I had not. So that was interesting, and we'll get to that.
Yeah.
But
you hate
1.
I'm sorry, I cut you off.
No, you're good. I was just saying. So yeah, 2 is interesting, but 1. I was so bummed that I hadn't seen 1 in such a long time, because it really was such a charming film, and it was just fantastic. And I totally get the love that people have for it, and I get why. Not only is it, I think, Columbia's highest grossing film with inflation, but it's, why it's done so well. And it's just, it makes it endure. Thank you. So, but yeah, that's sort of my take. How about you guys?
I think that the first time I saw either of them was there's times where, like, especially during October, you'll have like movies that are shown on TV as like the TV cut. So they cut out 30% of the movie so you can put in commercials. And I don't actually know which one was the first one that I saw pieces of, because I just like was seeing chunks of it without really knowing. And at some point, I'm assuming sometime during college, I sat down with a group of friends and we actually watched the first one all the way through. as just a part of a movie night. So that's the first time that I actually saw Ghostbusters all the way through. And I realized in preparation for this that I had never seen Ghostbusters 2 all the way through. I'd only ever seen it as the chopped up TV movie version. And watching it all the way through, it's better than a lot of movies it's better than some movies that we've seen recently. Not to name any names. Hey, Jack, you okay there? I think
I'm good. I'm good.
Yeah,
I'm fine now.
All right, good.
Thanks.
And but it was fine. It was okay. But yeah, it actually, I mean, I kind of wish that I had seen it earlier. I think that if I had seen this movie all the way through when I was younger, I might be in the same position that John was in, of like, this is the kind of movie that I would enjoy a lot.
Yeah.
It's the same reason, like, I wish way back when we talked about Hocus Pocus, I wish I had seen that when I was a kid, because I would have super nostalgia for that. Or because it's the same reason I enjoy Scooby-Doo. It's like this kind of spooky but not scary. It's not a horror movie, but it's got the spooky aspect of it, which I very much enjoy. So yeah, it's right up my alley of like things that I enjoy, of a bunch of weirdos chasing around ghosts with their what are they called? What's the things that they use? Proton packs. Yes, thank you. I couldn't remember. Yeah, chasing around ghosts, shooting proton packs everywhere. Great.
How about you, Joseph?
Well, kind of in the similar sense of like grabbing it on like a cable TV, just cut up for like AMC, I think it was. But unfortunately, I actually saw bits and pieces of Ghostbusters 2 first. Oh yeah, that's right. Get the tomatoes ready. Get the booze ready. Add booze in post, just so I'm justified. It's like, yeah. But yeah, pretty much it was the opening. I remember it vividly, ironic enough. It was like the opening scene. It was like, they're going off to do the thing, and it's like this is in the second one where they're like they've been sued and they can't do Ghostbuster stuff anymore. It's like, I don't know, they said something about He-Man or something, because that was the era.
Yeah.
And it was like,
oh yeah,
hey, what's He-Man? It's like, I don't know. I was like, yeah, He-Man and Skeletor. It's like, oh, well, what's this movie about? It's like, oh, well, this is, and my mom saw it on TV. It's like, ooh, this is the second Ghostbusters. Maybe we should find the first one, and something like that. And I guess a few weeks later, it's like we just wound up watching Ghostbusters. That was like 8, I think, and we just had a family sit down and watch Ghostbusters. And my folks were big fan, and still are big fans of like Bill Murray, Dan Aykroyd. Like that era of Saturday Night Live was like, that was theirs, and they're still very fond of it. So it was fun sitting down and watching them with it, because then that kind of exposed me to them too, and that's kind of about those good kind of growing up memories. Exposed me to a lot of the good comedy. Well, again, comedy subjective, but good comedy that I'm into now.
Right.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of cool. I think that's something I forgot to add is my dad's a very big Bill Murray fan. So watching this again now, it's funny. It's like half these lines are just lines my dad uses in general. Like one that is one of his favorites to use is when you have Venkman's talking to Egon. He's like, I take back some of the things I said about you.
Yeah.
It's such a ridiculously quotable movie. And it was, just such a blast. But I guess before we dive right in, we do a brief summary of what the movie's about for those who have not seen it. It is about Peter Venkman, Ray Stantz, and Egon Spengler, a trio of eccentric parapsychologists who start a ghost-catching business in New York City. That's basically what happens. And at the end, they face the big bad named Gozer, and as well as the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man. Wow, I can't speak. Stay Puft Marshmallow Man, and defeat them both.
Spoiler alert.
And save the day. Well, if they haven't seen it now...
I know, I'm totally kidding.
Yeah, like 30, 40 years later, if you haven't seen a movie,
yes.
It's your fault.
Right. And especially if you click on this episode without having seen it, it's like... that's your fault.
What
So,
did you expect?
Yeah.
but yeah,
That's
this it's interesting looking. I watched there's this thing on Netflix called The Movies That Made Us. So I watched the episode they did for Ghostbusters, which was very interesting. I think my favorite story out of all that was just how they got the rights to the name Ghostbusters. So if you guys know this as well, please correct me if I'm wrong, but what it was originally there was a 1970s live action show called The Ghostbusters, which was owned by Filmation, and they were just not giving up the name for the Ghostbusters movie. They like wanted so much money for it, and they just weren't willing to pay for it. So they almost went with the name, I believe it was Ghost Breakers was the one they were going to go with if they couldn't get Ghostbusters. So what ended up happening around the time that they were making Ghostbusters was I think Coca-Cola ended up buying Columbia Pictures, and they ended up letting go of the head guy at Columbia at the time named Frank Price, who was one of the main guys who was got Ghostbusters off the ground and helping get that made and all that. So what was funny is when they let him go, Universal picked him up very shortly after, and Universal owned Filmation. So he was like, okay, so I'm going to give them the rights for Ghostbusters now since I have the power to do that. So that's pretty cool.
Oh yeah, it all came together.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
So I thought that was pretty
Come
cool.
Can you
together.
run some fact checking for us? That sound about right?
Yeah. I was really interested in that too. I mean, like, I had not heard the story about like the heads of the studio changing hands, and the fact that like when they agreed to make the movie, they had been like, okay, you need to have this out by like June 8th, 1984, and that was like before they even started making the movie. They had the date, and that really restricted them, and then also kept them from being able to fine tune some of the effects, which the cheesy effects are charming, and I even now when I watch it sometimes I'm like, oh, I wish they could like fix that, whatever. But now that I know that they really were limited by time, it makes it more forgivable, because you're just like, oh man, I kind of feel bad for them actually that they, they weren't given the time and the resources to make that right. Do it the way they wanted to.
Yeah, and like you almost appreciate it more. It's like, I mean, because I think if I remember right from that like episode, it was like they were talking about. So I think it was June of '84, right? So I think if it was June of '84, I think it was like May of '83 they asked. So it's like they had 11 months, or sorry, 13 months to do this. And so it's like when you're watching it now, it's like that's impressive. They got that much done in a year. It's like that's insane. So. I mean,
and they had issues with the cast, like
right.
They wanted John Belushi, and then he died. And then they wanted John Candy for the Rick Moranis role, and then they were like, no, we don't like the way that John Candy wanted to do it with like a Russian accent or something weird. Yeah.
And I think they wanted to get like Eddie Murphy to be like the comedy, but I think he was busy doing Beverly Hills Cop or something, and so they got Bill Murray.
Pee Wee Herman to be Gozer.
That would have been so funny.
That's a choice.
No, Paul Rubens was supposed to be Gozer. That's crazy.
That would have been the weirdest
something.
thing that guy did in his whole career.
Right, and that maybe that was supposed to be like the joke of that. I thought Gozer was supposed to be a man. That Winston said.
Yeah. Interesting. A little in joke.
Right.
Yeah. What was I looking at? One other interesting story that was funny was sort of Slimer. Sort of that he was apparently, because Belushi had died and they wanted him to be in the film originally, this was sort of, Slimer was in a way, sort of their way of putting Belushi in it, because they said, I think the night before, to the guy in charge of Slimer, like, okay, we want you to, everything's going great. We're going to be showing him tomorrow for his first scene. Oh yeah, by the way, he needs to look like John Belushi. So they're like, the main guy is like, yeah, I don't think that's going to happen. He didn't tell them that, but he's like, working on it. And so the next morning, I don't think he'd done anything, but he just gave it to him. He's like, here you go. And they're like, great, look just like him.
Oh my God.
Oh man.
So that's kind of funny, but yeah, it's crazy how much they were able to get done. I mean, if you guys haven't seen that episode, I mean, I think it's like season 1 of the Movies That Made Us. It just the entire process they went through to make the film was very interesting. So
Yeah.
You know, that kind of does make sense about the Slimer thing. He does seem like a very John Belushi in Animal House type character. Yeah.
Yeah. I thought it was interesting. Maybe one of the reasons it's just so quotable is I think you had Aykroyd and Ramis were the guys who wrote the script, but apparently like almost none of the scenes were filmed as scripted. Most people had at least one ad lib. Most of Bill Murray's lines were ad libs. Just everything felt so smooth and everything just worked so well.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of that had to do with, they weren't stuck to the script. They were pretty much able to do their own things. All these, comedy legends were able to do what they do best, and they did it flawlessly.
Yeah, like Peter Venkman seems like he's just entertaining himself the entire movie.
Right.
He's very, very self-entertaining.
Yes.
And it makes you wonder how much of that is just Bill Murray just being like, I'm just going to have fun with this.
Right. And that's the thing. I think that's really one thing that shines through. I feel like they all seem like they're having fun with this, and they all seem like they're having a great time, and I think that really shows. And I think it's kind of funny. I think Sigourney Weaver is great in it, but I do think it's kind of funny that she wanted to be on it, and that was something that worked out because, before this she'd been doing very serious roles, and even the people who hire her on were kind of surprised they got her because before this she'd done Alien. I don't know if Alien's no, I think Alien's later 80s. I can't remember, but she at least done Alien at this point, so she was already rising in the ranks as far as a serious actress, and then she decided to do this, and she was excellent. She fit right in. So
yeah,
I thought that was cool.
Alien was in 79, so yeah, it doesn't seem like it's just off of that, but yeah, kind of.
Right. Well, John, you already mentioned the Pee Wee Herman thing, so I don't need to mention that. That was just that would have been that was so weird. I mean, Pee Wee Herman's something.
Right. No, I'm glad with the way they ended up doing it.
Oh, sure. Yeah, it worked out great. I thought was interesting. I don't know if you guys, the Joes knew this, but apparently, looking at it, apparently Winston was supposed to have a way bigger role, but apparently, because they had Bill Murray, a lot of those scenes ended up giving to Bill because he was the lead and he got more screen time. So that was interesting. I still think Winston's great, and I think as a character, I really like that he's sort of almost our gateway into the Ghostbusters because he's, the other three, they own the company, but he's like an employee. He just works for them. It's just a job. So he's able to sort of ask the questions that we would ask starting there. So he's sort of, I don't know the best word for it, but he's basically able to, we're able to see the world.
Man. He's like the blue collar straight man. And then there's
exactly
eccentric scientists and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. And we're able to see it through his eyes. So that was cool.
Yeah.
And we'll get to 2, but I want to say one of the reasons this film worked and the second didn't is because he had his mustache. Shaving that off, I think that might have been what ruined Ghostbusters 2. I'm just going to say that right now.
Hot take of the day.
It's like Samson.
Just like Samson. Exactly like
they
that.
got all their strength from his mustache.
From the mustache. That was
from his mustache. Yes. Yeah. No doubt. So as soon as we see Winston in Afterlife, we'll know just from his what his face looks like, whether or not it's going to be a good movie or not.
That's right.
We'll get one look and we'll be like, yes or no.
Yep. That's going to be what determines whether or not we walk out of the theater then and there. So
he's going to be a last if we see cameo at the very end.
Yeah, just to keep you there.
Yes,
the whole
that's
time.
right.
Yeah, obviously.
It's going to be the last 5 points out of 10, mind you.
Nice.
And speaking of Ernie Hudson, I just gotta say he's great. I'm gonna gush about Ernie Hudson for a minute. I don't know. I wouldn't say he's a character actor. I wouldn't say he's like not that big, but I suppose when you think of Ernie Hudson, he really does have a lot of side character parts, and there's nothing wrong with that, nothing at all. And I think he knocks this one out of the park, really. Again, by being the straight man against the three comics in terms of the cast stuff, and he's got some of the, again, talking about the lines and stuff, he's got some of the best lines to me.
Oh yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Like of course the classic, when somebody asks you're a god, you say yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
And of course, he's seen things that would turn you white.
That's right.
Yeah, and the TV version alternate line, I think, is I have seen stuff that'll turn you white.
Of course.
Of course.
That's funny. I don't know if you guys, I sent this was a YouTube video I think I sent John years ago, but this was something interesting. I don't know if you guys heard the theory, but basically Ghostbusters isn't about anything. It's like, there's a plot, but as far as like an overall theme in the movie, there really isn't one. And none of the characters really change throughout the film. They pretty much end the film the way they've started. The only difference is they now have a successful business where before they didn't. But like them as characters, they don't really change. It's so like the film really isn't about anything, but I don't think that changes the fact that it's still a very fun, well done movie.
I think it works because that they're flat. No, not flat. They're static in the sense that they don't change, but they're not flat characters.
No, I'd agree with that.
Because if it's flat and static, like the it's a 2016 one, then it doesn't work out. But again, it works because even though they don't change, they're distinct enough, and in that way that they're able to, it's able to go through, and you don't really notice it until like you realize, well, I guess they didn't really have character arcs. They were just themselves, and it works out.
Yeah.
I mean, I think Peter grew a little bit, but like because he didn't seem the hero type in the beginning of the movie, and I think
That is true.
by the end he kind of steps up a little bit. I mean, it's not major, and then the fact that he's like a womanizer established in the first scene, and then it seems like a one woman guy at the end, but then the second movie kind of ruins some of that.
Right.
It kind of shows that he hasn't really grown.
Second movie,
and it's like I'd almost it is one of those where it's like, again, I think I guess might as well just go into two now, and we can always go back to one. But it's like what's interesting with
we're loosey goosey now, Jack. We're going all in.
Just not going back now, too late. So it's interesting
podcast
because
portions here.
Again, there are some scenes from two I like, but I feel like Ghostbusters would stand the test of time better if it was just a one and done, because most of two is basically is like they repeat the beats of the first film but make it more family friendly. And I feel like in the process of doing that, and they try to have more of a positive message, I feel like they almost sacrifice a lot of the charm of the first film. And so
it's like sanitizing that era of Saturday Night Live. It wouldn't work, and it didn't.
Yeah, that's fair. I think you're exactly right that the first movie isn't about anything other than like fighting evil monsters is kind of cool.
Right.
It's almost the precursor of all of the modern action movies, right? Where sometimes you pretend that there's a message, but really it's let's fight some monsters and have fun with it. And maybe you have a character arc, maybe you don't. Maybe the characters are exactly the same people. But it's let's save the world. Congratulations, the world is saved. And then the second one is let's do exactly the same thing, but you're just retreading the same ground. You're just cycling over what you've already done before.
Right.
So it's like, what's the point?
Right. And the difference is in the second film, they defeat the villains with the power of positive thinking. So.
Yes. Instead of like, instead of having a nice Chekhov's gun of like, hey, don't cross the streams. We need to cross the streams because it's the only way that we might die, but it's the only way we might save everyone in the process. It's like,
right.
Hey, here's this magic goo that does magic goo things. Well, we're gonna goo magically at the magic stuff because that's what the magic goo is capable of now. As long as we spray it all over the inside of the Statue of Liberty, which everyone loves.
Right.
This is our get out of riding jail free card, and we're gonna use it however we want it.
Well, because the goo really is just it's a MacGuffin plot device item that saves them. It's like, okay, the goo is doing evil things. Now the goo is doing good things because we positively charge this goo.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
I don't think
What?
he's a scientist at all.
I don't think that means yeah.
John, since obviously you'd seen the first, and then you'd seen Real Ghostbusters. Going into, I'm assuming you ended up seeing Ghostbusters 2 in theaters. What were your thoughts on it seeing
Yeah.
initially?
Okay, now again, I was 9
Sure.
when Ghostbusters 2 came out, and as far as I remember it, I think I loved it immediately just because I was such a fan.
Sure.
And at 9 years old, I'm pretty sure you just kind of like everything,
That's fair.
you know. Yeah, and
But we all
so
make mistakes.
I mean,
It's fine.
right. I remember just being so excited to see a new Ghostbusters movie, and I think I remember asking for the tape of it for Christmas that year or whatever. But like,
Oh.
in the years past and rewatching it, it's so depressing to think that, like, okay, the first movie ends on such a high note, and
Mhm.
then the second one opens up and they've broken up and they all got other jobs and they're weird jobs, and then, like, Ghostbusters doesn't exist anymore, which makes no sense because you've got a TV show that is all about how they have a business and then they are able to have stories every single week about busting other ghosts. And I think that's all fans probably ever wanted, was like, just give us a movie of more of them doing what they do. We don't care
Right.
about them breaking up and getting back together. Just give us another story. That's all. It doesn't have to be the same movie
Yeah.
again. So,
Mhm.
watching it, it's so bittersweet because it's like, I'm thankful that those 4 guys got to suit up and be Ghostbusters again. Because especially now that Harold Ramis is gone, it's like,
Right.
I'm just thankful that there's something out there that had them back together. One of my favorite moments in the whole movie of the second one is when they're joking around about the toaster, and it's just the 4 of them as friends around the pool, and they're like, they're talking about the science stuff, but then they're goofing off. At the end of the last moment of that scene is when they all grab to, like, tackle Peter because he teased them about it eating his hand. And I just, especially now, I just love that camaraderie is
Yeah.
like exactly what those guys were about. Um, Other than that, like, the best other scene in the movie is the courtroom scene and busting the
Oh yes.
Scoleri brothers. But, like, I think everybody just wanted more of that kind of thing,
Right.
And I mean, the fact that it's a haunted painting is silly, and then it wants Oscar the baby, and then there's just so many. I mean, the Statue of Liberty thing is another attempt to do the Stay Puft thing,
Yep.
but in a good way, and then the
Mhm.
positively charged slime. There wasn't a deleted subplot that Ray is using the device to kind of like check out the painting, that he gets possessed there, and that when they're driving away from the museum, he tries to kill them by running the car into a tree. And during the musical montage in the movie, you see them in the car, and the car is going a little bit like wild, and you see Peter turn around and look back. He's facing the back of the car, and he
Yeah.
turns around and he looks at Ray, and then he looks back, and he does like a double take. That's from that scene that they just cut out and put
Huh.
in that montage. But it is actually, I don't know why they would cut that out, because, like, that continues the idea that he's now linked to Vigo, so that at the end when Vigo possesses him, there's more than just, like, hey, Ray, get out of the way, and then all of a sudden he's possessed. I mean, some of those ideas are interesting
Yeah.
at the end of the day. And Bill Murray has complained that the movie was not what he signed on for. So it
Right.
kind of makes you wonder what the original vision that he was told about that this movie was supposed to be. And I wonder who sat down and changed it so much. Now, you can also look at it, and by the way, I've got a lot of thoughts on this, sorry. But
No,
like,
go for it, please.
This is what we're here for.
but like,
Go right ahead.
yeah, but you can look at the movie and you can see how much, like, the first movie is what it is. The second movie is influenced by the cartoon show that was spawned from the first movie. I mean, everything down to Janine's, like, orange hair and green outfit. She
Mm.
looks like the Janine from the cartoon show. Slimer was their friend in the cartoon show. All of a sudden, Slimer's like in the firehouse and friends with the Ghostbusters. Like, Ghostbusters 2 is basically a live action real Ghostbusters episode. And it's kind of sad because the show's great. The first movie's great, but the second movie just became this like awkward, you know, amalgam of the two of them and not a legit installation of the series or something like that. So, I mean, I agree with every complaint you probably have about the movie. And it's nostalgic for me, but it's one of those movies that I watch and there's things about it that irk me while I'm watching it, but at the end I still kind of like it.
Yeah.
But there's there's just those movies that you like, but then there's just parts that like they grate on your nerves, and it's sad, but that movie definitely has that for me. But I mean, and who knows what the vibe of the new one's going to be, but I'm kind of hoping. And they keep saying it's going to be a lot like the original, and I've already heard some of the music on iTunes of the new score, and they totally are copying themes musically from the first movie, which has me excited. So
Yeah.
we'll see, I guess. But yeah.
Who are they getting for? Oh, sorry. Were you gonna say, Joe?
I was gonna say it's interesting to hear because everyone has those things that's their favorite thing, and nobody can hate something as much. Nobody will ever hate something as much as you hate your favorite thing. You know, like it's which is like, you know, it's a funny way to phrase it, but also it's true. Like there are things that I am a big fan of, and nobody is as frustrated with those franchises as I am because I love the franchise.
Funny. Yes, which is why I hate the idea of the reboot. Yeah,
right.
Yeah, because this is a thing that you love, and you're like, wow, I really love this. It's also terrible in a specific way. Like you know how it's wrong in specific ways, and you can see where it could be great, which is it's interesting to hear you talk about that. But also, I agree with your criticisms of like, it seems like they have they needed to pick a lane, right? Like they wanted it to still be the kind of goofy, silly, not about anything, but they also felt like they needed to put a little bit more of a story in there, but not too much of a story.
Right.
Like instead of making it where like, I don't know, you could cut out the first bit where they're trying to get back to where they're getting the band back together, basically, and just pick off with, I don't know, you could still keep the courtroom scene because you could still have them be like they caused some
trouble
problem
while doing something.
Right? Yeah, they were doing a routine thing, but then it got way out of hand because there's a ghost that's setting up, it's building up to whatever the final battle is going to be. That gets way out of hand. And then the courtroom scene, and then Ray gets like semi-possessed by whatever the big bad. It can still be the haunted painting, or it can be something else. And like there's actually a bit of a struggle. There's actually like tension and nuance and complexity to the story. Or you cut all of that out and you just have it be the first movie again within a just silly and goofy and funny, and there's no serious themes really.
Just start at the courtroom scene, start the movie there, and then what is it? Get the writing room to come up with 5 to 8 different scenarios. You run through them, and then you connect them with a little thin line of, I guess, the painting, like you said, and then it's fine. And you're fine.
It's so funny you mentioned the thing with Ray getting possessed, because there were a couple times where I see him, was like, is he getting possessed? Because he like makes a look. It's like, you know, one of those looks where like you think he's going to get possessed and like they don't do anything with it. I'm like, that would have been very interesting. Would have made more sense for, I don't know, if him being possessed, he comes in and takes Oscar instead of Oscar coming on the roof and this weird ghost thingy takes him. It's like, that would have made more sense and been more interesting. But
like a weird ghostly version of Janosch.
Right, which we've never seen before.
Like no sense.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
and then, you know, if he's possessed, then like he's subtly sabotaging them. Like they take a sample of the magic goo stuff, and they're testing it, and he's destroying some of the samples, or he's destroying some of the data, so they don't. So Egon doesn't figure out what's going on, or something like that.
I mean, maybe they didn't want to villain Ray, but still.
Yeah,
Dan Aykroyd didn't want to vilify Ray.
Yeah, because I'm definitely
like Hawkeye in where he's possessed the whole time.
That's fair. Although it works better then, because if you know him from movie 1, right? So you're like, I know that this character is a good character. I appreciate this character. Like, actually, it could be a double-edged sword, because a double-edged sword. Because then you're like, well, I hate that my favorite character is a villain. It's a semi-villain the whole time.
Yeah.
So
Right.
they split the baby, right? They cut the baby in half and kind of had it both ways, and it ended up being terrible.
Wait a minute.
I'm like, they cut Oscar in half?
Yeah, they just cut
Oh.
Oscar
I
in
didn't watch
half.
that cut.
Yeah, so
That's
by the
funny.
way, spoilers.
A very poor choice of words.
They cut the baby. Boy, that's really evil for Ray to cut a baby in half.
Yeah.
And that was the TV cut.
Yeah. Yeah. See, I told
there's
you
a
I
reason
watched
I'm
the
not letting my kids watch Ghostbusters 2. It's because it's a bad movie, but also because
Oh, that's funny. It is interesting because I'm definitely not a fan of. I mean, it's like sometimes I get it, and it sometimes can move the plot forward. But I almost always dislike when good guys get mind controlled by bad guys because it's not them, and you want to see the good guys be good guys and bad guys be bad guys. It's just that's just something
Right.
that people love to see. But what's funny is this film has so much against it that trying that it probably actually worked and been something to help it is what I think. But
it's one of those things where it's everybody hates it, but everybody hates it, right? In a way where it's like you are rooting for the heroes to win, not because like they save the day, but because they save their friend, because it's a believable stakes. Right? We can believe that Ray is possessed and that somehow kills him maybe at the end. Right?
Oh no! Then people would riot. You can't do that.
No,
well, but it's believable. Like it's not believable that the evil painting guy takes over the baby and then rules the world because it's like we know that's not going to happen, right? We know that's
right.
We know that's not actually something that they could do. But having one of the characters die is believable stakes, or having him be mind controlled and we have to save him, that's believable stakes. And so that's just part of good writing, right? Is having a problem that the viewers believe will actually happen.
Reasonable stakes.
Yeah, I see. I think the villain just wanted to be stronger because if he had absorbed the baby, then he would have the strength of a grown man and a little baby. So, and then
you mean like Dwight Schrute?
Just like Dwight Schrute.
Oh man! That's
All right.
I had to throw that in there. I'm like, I got to make this joke.
Man.
So,
that's great.
I wish them using as the bad guy the morgue doctor from Psych is the bad guy in 2. That was fine.
Oh,
but,
I hated him. I hated him since Ghostbusters 2, and then seeing him in Psych as the morgue doctor. I can't. Oh, the coroner or whatever.
Yeah, there you go.
It makes me love him now. So now, I mean, he's still a jerk in Ghostbusters
Right.
2, but like now I'm like, hey, it's Woody. You know? So, yeah. It's saved my feelings. I mean, because ever since I was a kid, I saw him as the jerk in Ghostbusters 2. Which, by the way, I had the coloring book for Ghostbusters 2 because I was a kid. And no, hold on. It's got a deleted scene in it where his character goes up to the Jello mold, whatever you want to call it, the slime mold on the museum, and it sucks him in. And I think I'm trying to think what. I guess it was the Blu-ray. They finally that scene as a deleted scene for Ghostbusters 2, and you actually see him getting pulled in, and then his shoe like lands on the ground. So there was a page in the coloring book of him like his legs sticking out of the Jello mold or something like that, the slime mold, whatever. And I always thought that was really interesting because I'm like, why is this moment in this coloring book that is totally not in the movie?
That is weird.
So that yeah.
Well, that's interesting. It's interesting how like you get crossover but not perfectly orchestrated or not perfectly coordinated.
Yeah,
that's some film theory stuff. Where like, secretly in the Ghostbusters 2 coloring book on page 37, they show the scene where you're like, okay, hold on.
But even as a 9-year-old, I was confused. What the heck is going on here?
Oh, that's funny. I think something would have even worked even better. Like I could see this. Just because I still think the best scene from 2, in my opinion, probably, I mean, again, the scene with the toaster is very sweet, but like just the best scene, I think, is the courtroom scene. I think that's great. Getting
absolutely.
Rick Moranis, the accountant, as their lawyer, which is great. And you have Venkman telling him everything that he's supposed to say.
Yes. Yeah.
And of course, I think probably my favorite joke from the movie is
Give me a
just
break. We're both lawyers.
right. That's great.
That's good.
But I love when they turn on their packs and you have Do Ray
Oh,
Egon.
yeah.
I love that. It's
Yeah,
so just
me too.
goofy, but it's so Egon. It's
Right.
perfect. I
Right.
love it.
Egon.
And he's so proud of
Love it.
himself.
Yes. Yeah.
He knows what he
It
did.
is good.
Yes.
Yes.
So I feel like if you'd almost tacked that on at the end and had Peck as you could have almost tacked that on at the end of
Ooh.
one after they defeated Gozer. You could almost tack that on at being immediately after. Like, sure, they're getting sued, and then they have that scene at the end. All the charges are
Ooh,
dropped.
yeah.
They walk out, suck in the guts,
That would've
boys.
been
We're the
interesting.
Ghostbusters and the movie.
That's actually
Yeah.
yeah, that's not terrible. That's
It would
not
have been a
terrible.
little
yeah.
long, but you could do it.
Yeah.
It would have put an
Uh,
end to what is it, Peg's character, I guess, in a better way than him
Yeah.
just getting escorted out of the mayor's office. Or
Well,
no,
yeah,
did
what
you
is it?
see
Getting
him
hit with the
get
marshmallow?
doused
Yeah, he
with
gets hit with a shaving cream.
marshmallow?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That story's interesting. I don't know if you had heard about that. Apparently, I think it was like, I want to say it was 75 pounds of shaving cream. That's the marshmallow material they use. It's like that's what they're going to use
Yeah.
originally. And so they were going to actually put it on the actor who played Peck. But before they did it, just to make sure it was safe, they put it on a stunt guy. The stunt guy fell back flat on his back with 75 pounds of that. And so they did half of that and did that, and he was fine. But
Oh my gosh.
You
good thing they
okay, Phil?
tested.
You need a razor?
I think what annoys me the most about, or one of the things that annoys me the most about this film is something that I've noticed recently with a lot of films is a lot of times if there's a sequel to a film or a second or third film, a lot of times you can go back and be like, oh, probably the reason this was bad was because, and you look, it's usually a different director or different writer or something that
Yeah.
changed significantly with the production team or the acting. But this time, you had the exact same directing and writing team,
I know.
and it wasn't the same
Hmm.
quality. It's like mathematically it does not work in my head. That's what annoys me.
Yeah.
You think it
Well,
might have been
yeah,
studio
absolutely.
pressure, like more intense than the first one? Because this was either
I
the
think so,
number
too.
one grossing comedy or number two grossing comedy of all time at the time.
I mean,
It
it's
was
up
pretty
there.
high.
I was about to say that's
Yeah,
already a lot. Of
I think it
pressure.
has a lot to do with the cartoon show and like you said, studio pressure.
Yeah. But
I'd love to hear them talk about like a what do you call it? Like a documentary on what went wrong or something.
Right.
It's kind of, I mean, it seems more like, they had an idea for a fun little movie, or not, I don't know about little, but they had an idea for a fun movie, and people are like, hey, that made us money. Go do that again. They're like, and they're just like
Yeah.
little spinny discs, little spinny loading.
Oh, you mean like
well,
Back to the Future was the same way? Like the
Yeah.
director has said, like the studio was like, we want a sequel, and the director's like, I never would have put them in the car going to the future. Like he put the girlfriend in the DeLorean with Marty and Doc going to the future, and he's like,
Right.
I don't even like future movies. He's like, I never would have done that. And then they had to figure
Yeah.
out how to write the girlfriend out of the story in the second. Like it was such a mess, and you
Right.
watch that now, watch the sequels, and you're like, ugh, I see why. Yeah, you could tell that like the director didn't like doing this part of it and didn't know what to do with the characters, and then you had it. It's just, it's interesting when they force these sequels, and then no one has a really good idea when there's got to be someone out there who has a good idea. But
Right.
yeah, it's
Still, most of them wind up being pretty much what we get in the sense it's like just kind of resetting the status quo. Oh,
Mhm.
roll back all the good stuff, play the
Yeah.
same beats,
Mm.
maybe
Oh, yeah,
change it a little in tone.
That's the problem, right? That's the problem with sequels is when it says a good sequel says we establish this stuff in the first one and now we move on from that to something new. And a bad sequel
Yeah.
says, "Hey, you remember how you liked that stuff? We're just going to do that again." And you'll like it again. You'll like it the second time, right? You
Because you liked it
enjoyed
the first time.
Yeah, you enjoyed eating
Right.
the Twinkie the first time. You'll enjoy eating a Twinkie again, right?
That's
Or
a big
whatever it
Twinkie.
is. It's a big Twinkie. Yeah, that's why I was. But yeah, so
Yeah.
that's the problem, right? A good sequel is here is a world that we established. Here's a set of characters with relationships that we established. We're going to move on from that. We're going to build on that. And a bad one is like, hey, you know how we had these characters that had to get together and build their team before, and then they overcame a challenge together? Well, we're going to knock it all
do it
back to the
again.
ground. Yeah,
Right.
they have to come back together
back.
and rebuild the team.
I mean, look at Empire Strikes Back. It's one of the best sequels ever because it's totally different. It's not at all like the original Star Wars, and it's great. It's a great story. To everybody moves forward. There's character development. You know, it's exciting. It's different. It's like that's. I mean, why couldn't they figure that out? I mean, that was 1980, and Ghostbusters 2 was 1989. I mean, here you had a good example.
Yeah,
like
You're
just do a good job.
Well, I mean, that's been a problem since as long as people have been writing sequels. We still have that as a problem today. Like,
oh, absolutely.
Yeah,
that would bring up
people
interesting.
not.
We got a new episode now. How did studio culture affect sequels? It's like we got the good one from 80, we've got a bad one from 89, and now we got to get one from the early 2000s and from recently.
there you go. It is interesting.
It wouldn't
One
be
thing.
hard.
No, it wouldn't. There's there's so
the
many
hard
bad
part
sequels.
is narrowing it down.
Right, choosing
Right.
which bad sequels you want to cover exactly.
Yeah.
What's interesting and something that's kind of sad is when you get all these bad sequels, sometimes I feel like it's a rarity that the actors come out of it still liking the property, because I feel like you have I mean, I feel like it's very hard to get Bill Murray to do stuff Ghostbusters related. I mean, thankfully this stuff,
Yes.
like Afterlife, he came back. I mean, I guess he came back for the reboot too, but it's like apparently,
I just hope he doesn't get killed off.
oh, that would suck. Oh, that would be
I know.
awful.
But he has always said if he's going to do a third Ghostbusters, he has to die in it.
Oh my
And I
gosh.
googled his cameo from the reboot, the 2016 reboot, and he dies in it. Like, it was terrible too. But like, his character gets thrown out a window, and I'm like, this is so stupid.
Well,
And confirmation I never want to see this movie. But
what might be the best thing about that then is he said if they make a third, he wants to die. He didn't say anything about a fourth. So
right,
maybe
well,
right.
it will
So
be
technically, this is the fourth.
right.
But we don't want to count. We don't want to count the original third because
Right.
it's
For
a
Bill Murray,
reboot.
we'll
They
count. For
literally,
everyone else?
threw the original characters out. So
Right.
it doesn't.
They
count.
literally threw them out
Yeah.
a window.
Yeah, but I hope they don't Han Solo it. I really do.
I mean, if there's something where like he has a
still
heroic
stings.
death, where he sacrifices himself in a good way, like to save someone else or something like that, that's fine. If it's just a cheap thing, where it's like, yeah, he said he wants to die.
Disenfranchisement or whatever the adjective for getting thrown out a window is. Disembarment. I don't know.
Yeah.
Hold on.
Oh,
Hold.
he's doing it. He's googling.
Is there an actual phrase or like a term for that?
Oh, there is. I learned it in a class.
Oh my goodness, I did not know.
Word for being thrown out a window. Defenestration
Defenestration. Ayo.
is the act of throwing someone or something out a window.
That's fantastic.
The
I
more
didn't know that.
You know.
And that is the podcast word of the week.
Yeah. Word of the
There
week.
you
Is that our new segment? Word of the week.
Word of the week.
Word of the week. I love it.
Defenestration.
That's great.
That's that. That is
Your
a
top 10
very
defenestrations in film and TV shows in the latest podcast. Or was it pick of the week?
That's right. But yeah, that is. I think that is kind of sad that happens if you try to stretch too thin a property and try to you drain it of all its goodness, then you get the people involved don't end up being associated with it. Like I think what happened was after 2, either during or after 2, you had you had Reitman, Ivan Reitman, you had Aykroyd, Ramis, and Murray all agree. It's like, okay, we're not doing a third unless all 4 of us agree. Unless all 4. If one person says no, it's not happening. And so, and then I think, funny enough, you actually had something similar with Zemeckis. Like after 2 and 3, it's like nobody is touching Back to the Future until I'm dead.
Right.
Basically. And so, it's kind of sad that people won't just end on high notes and they try to, milk as much out of it as they can. And you get a lot of mediocre ways to end franchises. So Afterlife is very exciting to me, not only because it looks like they actually have something decent to tell, but I love the idea not even of the movie itself, but just the idea that you have Jason Reitman, who's Ivan Reitman's son. He grew up loving Ghostbusters, and he's funny enough. He's actually the kid in 2 who tells at the party who tells, I think, Ray and Winston that their dance sucks, basically. But I just think it's great that you have this father-son relationship, and he's like, you know what, Dad, as a tribute to you and to this franchise, it's like it's for another generation. For he's finishing the franchise, and it's just almost showing appreciation for his dad's work. And I almost love that relationship because I can't think of a single other franchise where that's happened, where you've had 2 directors in the family completing a franchise. I just think that's a beautiful thing, and I really hope they do it well.
He's gonna make a new Ghostbusters sequel. It's the real Ghostbusters sequel. Wait, no.
Please.
We'll work on the title.
Something I was going to ask you about, John. I know they made a video game that had all the voice actors come back. Was that decent? Like, decent story? How was that?
I thought it was great, and it's great to hear them again. I mean, Bill Murray's line delivery is very quiet. It's like very quiet and kind of blah, but it's still really cool to hear him in there. And I mean, all the originals are in there. And I don't know. It was made and written, I think, to be like a third movie. So it is again about like Gozer and Stay Puft, and then Stay Puft has mini Stay Puffs, but they're not little mini versions of him. Okay. They're like big, running around marshmallows and stuff like that. It's cool because like they have the proton packs and they have upgrades on the proton packs, and they have a trap that's built into the roof of the Ecto-1 so that you can deposit ghosts into the car, stuff like that. So it was a great way to like continue the story without them having broken up again and having to get back together. Like, you are playing not as one of them, but as a rookie. And, if you go down, that the guys have to come over and revive you, or if they go down, you have to go over and revive them. Yeah. And then if everybody goes down, then you die, But like they would also have you go off alone with like 1 or 2 of the guys at a time. So like you'd be following Peter through the Cedric Hotel, or you'd be following Ray through an office building where there are marshmallows jumping out of the ceiling, and he's yelling at you to like, fight them and bring out your PKE meter and take a scan. And it was just like, I think it was a Ghostbuster nerd dream, sequel / video game. I started playing it again a couple months ago because of the whole like remastered re-release they did in 2019. And it's great. It's hard. It's not an easy game, but it's a lot of fun. You just need to have time to do it. I don't like spiders, and there's a sequence like probably midway through the game where there's a ghost woman, Black Widow, whatever. It's like half woman, half gigantic spider. And so like I usually get stuck at that. I know, right? I usually get stuck around there and be like, I don't want to play this anymore. But it's great, and I'm really glad they made that and that it exists.
Yeah,
that's total cool. Side note: the correct term for that is a drider, D-R-I-D-E-R.
Nerd alert!
Like a centaur, but for spiders.
What is the definition of drider? What is that?
It's like a centaur, but for spiders. Spiders.
Oh,
body.
Interesting.
Oh
That's
my
funny.
gosh!
What's the matter, Jack? Could you not hear over my nerd alert?
I couldn't. I was just being alerted. That's all I heard.
Nerd alert! Nerd alert!
Alert alert!
Alert alert!
I do think.
Isn't it kind of like the pot calling the kettle black? If anyone in this room is being called a nerd, it's pretty obvious.
Yeah, basically,
it's fun to do.
We've been talking this long about Ghostbusters. Yeah, it should be obvious.
That would make you a nerd.
Oh, absolutely.
That's not possible.
I think back to the
That's not true. That's impossible. Sorry, continue.
Something I just thought of because you mentioned like in the game you get told to use your PKE meter. like this movie
Yeah.
takes place in a time where there's this weird crossover between supernatural and sci-fi, like where we have there's a time period where we have people saying, oh, you have all these like tech tools that you can use to study the supernatural. That's just taken for in movies and TV shows, and also, you know, you get ghost hunter type people in real life that kind of comes after that. Whereas nowadays, I feel like we see a lot more horror movies where we see a lot more horror movies, and it's just, here is a demon or a ghost or what have you that is, and there's no sciencing it, right? There's no hit it with the PKE meter or hit it or scan it with the hit it with the proton pack or any of those things. Like, it's just, this is magic supernatural stuff. Your science is bunk. It's just interesting to see like that time period where I think because I think we're on the other side of that. I think that's no longer culturally a standard anymore.
Yeah, but I think that's like one of the coolest things about Ghostbusters, especially when you're a kid, was the proton pack and the PKE meter and the ghost trap. Like, it was those toys, those gadgets, because you were like, oh, well, you know, I want to be a Ghostbuster. You know, I want to be able to do stuff, and you know, it was more than just horror.
Right.
It was, yeah, it was that adventure exploration, you know, kind of feel.
Yeah, I was almost thinking exactly what you were saying there, John. It's almost a similar vein to, I mean, it's kind of weird, but I'm almost comparing it to Spider-Man, where it's like, if you put on the Spider-Man costume, you're Spider-Man. If you get the proton pack and all that, you are a Ghostbuster. It's like
flight suit.
Right. Yeah, it's like they make it very easy. I mean, just to cosplay in general, but I mean, just for you to embody that character and just be one of them. It's, you know, and identify as one of them. I think it's kind of cool how easy they do that. And going back to kind of what you were saying, Joe, just about the horror films, it's interesting. I think, like, obviously most ghost related films these days and just in general, they mainly focus on the ghosts, whereas this film, its focus is so heavy on the characters and their camaraderie and their relationships. And I really think that's what makes it stand out. And even though the characters aren't necessarily the nicest people, you do, it is fun. You do really like their camaraderie and seeing them do stuff. They are a very fun group of guys to watch for 2 hours. And even with the little growth that they have, what I think is disappointing is, like you guys mentioned, is I feel like with 2, a lot of that's taken away and they basically just make them do all that again. Just the only difference now is Winston's mustache is gone. So,
Right.
And that's why it's bad.
That's why it's bad.
And he doesn't get that good moment with what is it, Ray on the bridge.
That's right. Them talking about Revelation. Yes.
Yeah. And Ray misquoting Revelation.
That's right.
Like, he cites the wrong.
It's okay. He's new.
Chapter. Sure.
Yeah, but I think unless you guys had anything else you wanted to shout out, I think we pretty much covered most of the high points there. I guess since we're going to catch Afterlife this week, we can go around and say sort of our expectations going in. So
before we do that, that's right. I got
you got something.
Zinger.
Okay, go for it.
More, I mean, the only one I have up my sleeve this evening. Now, there's been a slight debate between the three of us, John, sometimes about are certain movies Christmas movies, and I think some of you might know what I'm going to say.
No.
All right, smart guys. Is Ghostbusters 2 a Christmas movie?
It is a New Year's Eve movie.
There you go.
There we go.
Because they sing Auld Lang Syne, so it works.
All right, yeah.
Yeah, because the end of the movie happens on New Year's Eve. And they even come down the what do you call it, the ropes when Statue of Liberty breaks the glass and Peter goes, "Happy New Year." And then Janosch has the hat on and everything, a little Happy New Year hat. So it is more of a New Year's Eve movie than, which we don't really have a lot of
We don't.
That's a good
than
point.
anything.
So
Also
if nothing
released in
else,
June,
there you
so
go.
there's that too.
Yeah, it was released like June 16th or something like that. So it is a June movie about Christmas and New Year's. I don't know how in the world they did that.
The best kind of movie.
That's right.
That's like Shazam was a Christmas movie and that came out in April. It's like
That's
fine.
weird. I mean, at least
Yeah,
Ghostbusters,
why?
you'd think that would be, you know, September or October, but it's like both of them were released in June. That's very weird.
Yeah,
And you're definitely
yeah.
gonna watch it.
And
anyhow.
then what, Iron Man 3 was like had a Christmas thing going on too.
Right.
And that came out in like May.
Yeah.
So weird. I don't know why they do that.
What I thought was funny is one of the main reasons this, you know, looking back now is not super surprising. I think one of the reasons Ghostbusters 2 didn't make back a lot of money, I don't think it even had a lot to do with it wasn't as good of a film. It was Batman released the next week,
Oh,
and that took most of the money. So that's interesting. Yep. So, yeah. Actually, you know what? I think we can save our. I guess we can probably save our expectations for Afterlife for next week. Unless you guys want to do those now. I was thinking what we can probably do now is just give our official rankings for 1 and 2.
to be fair, we could have been done with him if I hadn't interrupted with that. You know.
Yeah, nice going, Joseph. You had one job. You had one job.
Come on.
I have a
Are you
job.
going to derail us on this hyper-focused, super specific podcast where we're always right on point? Good grief.
It's
Come
been
on,
pretty
sir.
good. It's
Come on,
been pretty
son.
good so far. We need to get John back. He keeps us on track.
Yes, he does. Thank you, John. Appreciate it.
You're very welcome.
Sure, I'd say we go with some ratings. How about you?
Yeah, we can do
start
some
us off?
rankings. So, me? Okay, I suppose. I absolutely love Ghostbusters. Seeing it again now for the second time this past week. I'd give it a solid 10. I just had such a blast, and I can't wait to go revisit. The only like minor thing would just be like we already mentioned was just some of the CG stuff. But again, considering the amount of time they had, that's even more impressive. So I will let that slide for just how great the characters were.
Since it's 84, I don't even think it was CG. I think it was just like the, camera tricks and
Right.
matte paintings and
Yeah.
and not animatronics, stop motion. I mean, those dogs were stop motion animation.
Right.
You're
It's
right
like
about animatronics
old
too.
school.
I think a decent amount of them were.
Yeah, I think you're right. My
Yeah.
mistake, not CGI, but yeah, whatever the effects they used for the dogs, it
Yeah.
looks a little dated, but again, considering the time and all that, I will totally let
It
that
looks
slide.
quite dated. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So
The
that
movie
was
makes up for its shortcomings.
exactly. I agree.
Indeed.
So I'm giving that a solid 10. And then with what is it? 2, I'm going to give that a 6 because you have likable characters and there are definitely some likable moments, but the film should have been so much better. So,
yeah.
How about our guest?
So we're doing out of 10.
We're doing out of 10. So, like, if you're doing letterbox, it's like just sort of half that. So, like, if it was 4.5, it'd be 9, and so 4 would be 8. Just that's how I do it.
Or we could use Joe's
Yeah.
ironic scale, but I think we're all pretty
Yeah,
set on. We're pretty set on it's either good or bad.
Yeah, these aren't ironically ranked movies.
No, they're not.
Right. I think I'm trying to think what I wrote on JFH as far as the rating goes. I probably gave it a 4.5 to be objective, but it's a 5 in my heart.
Sure.
It's probably overall I mean, there's moments in the movie that don't need to be there, like Ray and the ghost in the bed.
Right.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Which, by the way,
Yeah.
you should look on YouTube the full version of the original scene because he and Winston go to a fort and they're looking for a ghost there, and then at some weird point Ray puts on an old Civil War outfit, and then he just sort of lays down on the bed, and then the ghost comes out of the closet and does whatever with him, and Winston goes up to the door and he goes, "Are you okay?" And you hear Ray go away, man.
Oh my gosh.
And I'm like, oh, that's
Wow.
horrible, so bad. And
Nice.
yeah, so I mean, wow. They had put that on the 35th anniversary 4K steelbook set, which I didn't get because I didn't want to buy it again.
Sure.
And I figured, it'll come down in price by Christmas. No, they just actually sold out right away and they never released more.
Oh wow.
So it's like, I
Oh.
guess, super rare. So I'm kind of hoping that maybe by the 40th anniversary, they'll throw that stuff on there. But I guess they put a lot of it on YouTube now. Someone has leaked it. Anyway, so getting back on track, sorry. But it's yeah, so I guess I'd give it a 5 just because, I mean, there's no other movie I keep coming back to and loving every time I watch it. So to me, that says something too, just for the quality of the movie. And then so I guess 10. And
Yeah.
then for the second one, I probably would give it 3.5 because it's still an enjoyable film. It's got great moments. It's a terrible Ghostbusters sequel,
hmm
but it's a decent movie, kind of. I don't
Sure.
know. It's enjoyable. It's not great. I've watched Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull several times over the years. The most recent time I watched it for the 4K release, I hated it more than ever. So like, there's just certain movies that just the more you watch them, the worse it gets, or the
Yeah.
better it gets, or you still enjoy it about the same. And I haven't hated Ghostbusters 2 more. Like, there's aspects of it that as I got older, I realized the truth that, like, this, how could you break them up? How could you even break up Dana and Peter? Like, everything that's depressing that they could have done, they
Right.
kind of did to the characters, and then they kind of get back together. But there are wonderful moments throughout the movie
hmm
that kind of, make up for it a little bit. So anyway, that's the really long answer. Sorry. But yeah, so I guess, whatever. So that would be 7. So I'd say 6 or 7, honestly. Probably a 6, but 6 or 7 for me.
Nice. Okay. Joe, what you got?
Well, since I didn't see the first Ghostbusters until until I was already an adult, I don't have nearly as much nostalgia. So I would give it an 8, which is still pretty good.
Mhm.
Just not
Yeah,
perfect.
that's fair.
There's some
Sure.
scenes in there, like you said, there's some things that probably don't need to be there,
hmm
and it doesn't have the nostalgic appeal to me. And
That's
then
fair.
I would say I'll
Totally
go with
fair.
you guys and say the second one is about a 6.
hmm
So
Yeah.
don't have nearly as many thoughts because
Sure, that's fair.
No thought
Joseph,
that empty.
what you got?
Well, considering that I'm kind of at the middle point, it seems, having a little more, not exactly nostalgia in the sense of like, oh yeah, and then watch the TV show or anything, but it's like it was one of my growing up movies, I guess. Definitely an 8 out of 10 from that, and an 8 out of 10 from a like critical standpoint in terms of just all the elements, the
Right.
writing,
hmm
set design, costume design, casting. So
Yeah.
it is that era of, well, I was gonna say that era of movie making, but it's kind of its own thing, but kind of the mid 80s, put in a bottle, and it's great. It's the ecto cooler of the time, if you will.
There you go.
Yeah.
It really is great. And I think because I think it's so great and it's an 8 out of 10, that the sequel is even more disappointing.
Mm.
And I'm gonna go even
Yeah.
lower and just say straight up 4 out of 10. It was even I feel like even though the first thing I was exposed to Ghostbusters was the second one, I feel like after I watched the first one, it's like, okay, I don't need to see the rest of that other one.
Yeah.
This one's fine. I don't need to see
Yeah.
this. And
That's
well, for a
awesome.
while that was the case.
Yeah.
So yeah, 8 and 4.
I gotcha. Well,
That's fair, dude.
Yeah.
I got no judgment there. I think that's totally fair.
I was gonna say before we officially wrap up here, I saw in the trailer for Afterlife you have with the shoot. Is it the Ecto one? Is that right?
The
What's the
Hearst.
what's,
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm trying to get the right name. So
Their
yeah,
car. Yeah.
for their car.
Ecto
Yeah.
one.
Thank you.
Hearst
So
Ambulance.
I saw you have the girl sheet, like the seat pops out. Does that happen in anything
Yeah.
else, or is that a new thing?
No. It's a new thing. I mean,
It's a new thing.
honestly, I think that's cool. I mean, that makes sense because, they'd make adjustments to it. But the biggest question that I think a lot of fans have is, so why is it the Ecto One? The Ecto 1A was in Ghostbusters 2, and like, why would they go back and make adjustments to the Ecto 1? Where is the Ecto 1A, or why would they revert it back to Ecto 1 if they use the original Ecto 1?
Right.
The other thought is, was Ecto 1A a completely separate car, and is the Ecto 1, has it just been in this barn all this time? And does that also mean that when the original guys come to help out by the end of the movie, are we going to see Ecto 1A or a new version of the Ecto 1A with those guys? So I'm really curious and trying not to get my expectations. I forget if someone had commented like, "Hey, are we going to see the Ecto 1A?" And I was like, "Oh my gosh, I never thought about that." That like maybe in New York they have something, some vehicle recognizable, or whether it's Ecto 1A or something new that they had been, driving around in,
Yeah.
and Egon took the original Ecto 1 up to wherever it is they are.
Like more than one car. That's
In the middle of
interesting.
nowhere.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, see, now you have me wanting to think about Afterlife. So just for the heck of it, let's share very quickly what our expectations are for Afterlife,
pull out
because
the
I'm having
theory
so much fun right
boards.
now.
Yeah.
But yes, John, you were talking about you were already talking about wondering about the Ecto 1 for this. If you want to give your thoughts, by all means, go
Yeah.
for it.
Oh, about the whole movie?
No. I mean, Afterlife,
Afterlife.
like your expectations, like
Yeah. What I'm hoping for?
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, like, I would love a lot of screen time from the guys, but I think I heard rumors that they're only in it for like 10 minutes or something like that, which is kind of a bummer. So I probably won't, hold my breath that they'll have decent screen time. But I did pick up the new 6-inch figures for the old guys, and on the back of each one, it tells you what they're doing now, which I thought was really interesting. So they tell you what Peter does now and what Ray does now, and what Winston. Actually,
Yeah.
it doesn't really say what Ray's doing. It kind of like hints at. I guess maybe just because of his store, he's still doing Ray's Occult, which is cool. Obviously,
Okay.
from the trailer, he's still in his bookstore.
Yeah.
But yeah, and it mentions what Winston's doing, and I kind of didn't want to know that before going into the movie. At the same time, I'm like, that sounds really cool.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I'm really excited to see them. I'm wondering, like, I don't know if you saw the most recent mini trailer that they did. It's the final trailer that's like 1 minute long. But they have Peter's voice saying something like, "Hey, have you missed us?" And I thought to myself, I would not be surprised if he says that to Gozer, because like,
Oh
they
yeah.
defeated Gozer, and now those guys are back to do it again, and I think that sounds awesome. And I think the first, when you realize that they're revisiting the Gozer storyline again, I think the initial reaction is like, really, they couldn't come up with something better, something new, something
Right.
different. But the fact that they talk about Ivo Shandor in the first movie and how he designed the building that was Dana's building, that the mine that they find in Afterlife is Ivo Shandor's mine, where I guess he mined the metal to make his building, which kind of makes sense that maybe Egon discovered this mine and then moved there to keep an eye on it. And that's actually really interesting to me. So then it kind of makes it this like, now the family's going there, and I don't know how, they wake it up. It kind of reminds me of the Mummy with the book that wakens the mummy or whatever. But it's like, I want to know how that it all of a sudden. What'd you say?
What harm ever came from reading a book? Or
Right, exactly.
Of course.
No harm in
Nothing.
people reading the book. Yeah, exactly. So it's like, I'm kind of curious how they wake it up, but I'm kind of, if it's done well, it could be great. Just as long as they don't do Gozer again, if they didn't make another movie. But I think it'll be just enough of the fan service nostalgia, and also kind of baptizing the new characters going forward.
Yeah.
To take up the mantle. And I've heard Ernie Hudson say something like, "Hey, I'd love to do a fourth movie." So I guess that means he survives. But like, I just hope that I could totally see those guys like doing something that sacrifices their lives
Yeah.
to save everybody. I just hope that doesn't happen.
Right.
I'm still upset about Han Solo.
Yes. I think it's really interesting you mentioned Gozer, because as you mentioned that, someone was just thinking about is in the first film, Gozer says choose and die, and they choose Stay Puft Marshmallow Man. We see the Stay Puft bunch of mini Stay Puft Marshmallow Men in the store. So maybe, since they already chose that form, it's because that's the form they've already chosen. So it's going to come, in that form somehow to get them.
Until it defeats them, basically. Like it's stuck like that.
Yeah. Oh, that would be interesting. But why mini ones? I don't know. I guess. Well, I don't know. It's interesting. I'm curious like how that's going to be.
Yeah.
That's cool.
I really hope it's not just a bunch of nostalgia bait, which kind of winds up with stuff like this. But I don't know. The fact that, like you said, we were talking earlier that it's the director's son. I don't know. It feels like good hands, maybe.
Yeah.
I hope so. I hope so. And I felt that way too about all the Star Wars sequels being made by fans. And then that obviously didn't always really pan out so well.
You're jinxing it, John.
Who knows?
Stop.
No, I'm not jinxing it. I'm a realist in the sense that,
I know.
I'd rather it be made by a fan than someone who doesn't like it, which is what we got in 2016 almost.
Sure.
Right. Exactly. Although they claim to be fans, but it was made under I believe it was made in the wrong intentions. I mean, it was obviously like the studio saying, "Hey, I'm sure it was someone at Sony was like, we gotta have, we have this property, we own it, make something, and then the original guys are like, we don't want it, or Bill Murray's like, I don't want to come back, and so they're like, okay, well, Harold Ramis passed away, let's make something else then, and Jason Reitman said recently that he hopes there will be a whole bunch of other movies, like more Ghostbuster movies with other characters. To me, I mean, like, I'm not a fan of the franchise. I'm a fan of the characters.
Sure.
And the only reason why I'm okay with this one is it's moving forward. It's building off of what the characters created. And I understand they're too old now. But, I mean, even the cartoon show was the real Ghostbusters was those four guys. And, and knowing that the reboot was a gimmick, it was like, let's, not even just, like they're starting over. They're trying to do it to make money and keep the franchise alive, and let's make them all women, and then make Janine a man. Like it just was such a gimmick and such a statement that it just rubbed me the wrong way, and I was just like, you know what? No, I'm not buying it.
That's a pass for me.
What'd you say?
That's a pass for me. That sort of thing.
Yeah. Me too. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I got a free copy when I got Movies Anywhere when I signed up for that.
Same.
And I went into iTunes and I hid it from my account. I'm like, I don't want this.
Hide the shame.
Don't want anyone. Don't want to ever see it ever again.
Yeah, I don't want to go through my movies and see that.
Yeah.
I almost thought you said you got a review for JFH, and you're like, and it made great kindling too. So.
Right. No, I did not get a review copy. It was funny. Like I had gotten a press release for the 4K release of the original in 2019, and I practically begged the publicist. I'm like, please send this to me. It's my favorite movie. And then I think he just was like, oh, sorry, we have a limited product, and he didn't send it to me. And I'm like, come on, like,
wow,
really?
Rude.
Yeah, for real.
You should feel personally attacked.
Yeah. And he took that personally.
No, it wasn't 2020 yet, so
there you go.
I couldn't say it was a direct personal attack. Now everything obviously would be.
Of course.
Yeah, sure.
How about you guys? What are your expectations for the movie?
Cautiously optimistic.
Yes,
that's all.
Yeah.
I just looked up when you asked expectations. I looked up the relative runtimes of the two movies, and see that Ghostbusters Afterlife is 15 is about 20 minutes longer. And so my expectation is that either those 20 minutes are going to be the 20 minutes of the old characters being on screen,
Yeah.
or it's going to be 20 minutes of bloat added on. It's like it's going to be some things that are not necessary that are shoved in there to make it in the modern way that movies are made. You know, some actiony thing that doesn't add anything, and it's not really fun. It's just, hey, you need an extra 15 minutes so you can finish your bucket of popcorn, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So that's
a good point, because the other movies weren't that long. I mean, they weren't even 2 hours.
Yeah.
Right.
I don't know.
Like just
I don't
under.
remember what the second one was.
It's like 148, I think.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And that's short by like today's standards.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, part of me gets excited at it being longer, but at the same time, I agree with you. There could just be a lot of bloat. I mean, maybe they're using it to like establish these new characters.
Yeah.
I don't know, but obviously, I don't know. And for me, I'm not. I don't want to go see a Ghostbusters sequel to see a bunch of kids in school. But like, I realize it's kind of going to be like Stranger Things or whatever.
Right.
Yeah, I don't want to watch.
Setting up these
Everything's
characters.
been Stranger Thingsified.
Yeah, well, actually, that's also the second thought I had, which is that this is going to be Ghostbusters Stranger Things, which like
we already had actually in.
That's right,
Stranger
season
Things.
2. That's right.
Yeah, we had that in Stranger Things. That's
right.
Which is a great TV show, but
Yeah.
That being said.
Yeah. So, but yeah, I'm definitely in a similar boat where it's like I'm cautiously optimistic. I think if Reitman, like Ivan Reitman, isn't going to direct it, then having his son do it, I think is very sweet. And I think if done well, could be a very nice way to wrap up this trilogy. And then you can officially call it the Reitman trilogy, which I think would be fun. And it's going to go great for marketing. So, but yeah, I definitely say I'm cautiously optimistic. I want it to be good. There's definitely potential there. Again, wouldn't want anybody else directing it if Ivan wasn't going to. I think his son, again, very sweet. So I think it's in good hands. The question is, are they going to take advantage of that? So, and I guess we will see.
Yeah. Well, what's interesting too is Jason came to his dad with the idea for the movie. So his dad didn't even ask him to do the movie. He was like, "Hey, Dad, I have this idea for a sequel, and I want to make it." And I had, even when he had planned it, I had heard good things from anybody he had pitched it to, including Kevin Smith, which I thought was interesting. But part of me is bummed that it's not in New York, and like, I don't know, are we going to get to see New York maybe when they flash back to not flashback, but when they show what the original guys are up to?
Yeah.
Or are we going to get to see the firehouse? Like, obviously they're not Ghostbusters anymore again. So, and they're not going to get back into business, but they're going to, be in action again at the end. But
right.
I don't know. It's interesting. I'm curious how that all is going to play out. And so maybe that's kind of where the runtime comes into setting up new characters, kind of then taking it forward. Just like some of those movies that feel like they could have ended after, the 2-hour mark, but then there's like 10 minutes of wrap up. And maybe it's kind of like that. I don't know. Because Ghostbusters 1 it ends very abruptly. It's like, we beat Gozer, that's it. And, you don't see them afterwards at all. And even the second one is like that too, except for in the end credits, you see them getting like the key to the city or something.
Right.
But so I don't know. Maybe this won't be so abrupt. I guess. Who knows? I mean, movies have changed a lot in 30 years. the vibe of films and stuff.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, I agree. So I think that pretty much wraps it up for this episode. And then. John, thanks so much for coming on. It's been a blast having you.
Sure. Hope I didn't geek out too much.
Oh, that's the reason we brought you on. So you did it, amazingly well. So I appreciate it.
Okay,
and before we wrap up, did you want to plug your stuff?
Oh, sure. As Jack said, I have a website called JesusFreakHideout.com, and I say it so fast just because I'm used to saying it. JesusFreakHideout.com. hideout.com. Named after a DC Talk song that came out in 95. And then I have art that I've been working on for the past 10 years or so, and selling prints and some originals at John Dibiase art.com, which is JohnDibiaseart.com. So yeah, that's my junk. Somebody wants to check it out.
It's
Really
it's
selling
good
yourself.
stuff.
Pretty good junk. I will say that. It's very good.
It's very nice
It
junk.
is pretty good. We all looked at it when we knew you were going to be our guest, and we all agreed that it was pretty good.
Yes. Yeah.
As junk
Oh,
goes,
thanks, guys.
it's not terrible.
I need to write that Etsy review on his
Thank
page.
you. Yes, as junk goes.
It's not terrible. So
Yeah.
We've seen worse.
that's right.
Hey, I didn't want to tear my eyes out.
Tagline for this podcast.
As junk goes, it could be worse. Oh man.
I love it.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for listening to the Background Noise podcast, where if you were listening, we appreciate you. But if not, you did not miss anything. And hopefully you'll tune in next week where we talk about Ghostbusters Afterlife.
Ooh, spooky.
Well, regardless,
I can't say spooky anymore. It's not October.
regardless of what happens, just remember, I ain't afraid of no ghosts.
Da-na-na-na-na-na. Da-na-na-na-na-na.
Da-na-na-na-na-na.